Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. As Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announces more rights for parents at schools, she received backlash from not only Alberta teachers, but also from Ottawa. Federal Health Minister Mark Collins says the expansion to include mental health and assisted dying will now be delayed by 3 years. And this is Black History Month. Lethbridge College kicked off the event with a colorful opening ceremony.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has announced changes affecting parental rights and how they impact transgender people, including the use of pronouns at schools. Among the changes, which range from restrictions on hormone therapy and surgery to participation in sports, students 15 and under who want to change their names or pronouns at school will now need parental consent.
For minors age 16 and 17, parental consent won't be required for this, but parents will have to be notified. We will support families with a new pilot program to provide counseling services for families in need to assist with navigating these issues together. In rare circumstances, when transgender children experience an abusive parent, there are, of course, child protection laws that will be enforced.
Now, in response to these upcoming changes in Alberta schools, 2 advocacy groups are threatening legal action against the province. Egal Canada and Skipping Stone Foundation say the Alberta government has chosen to play politics with vulnerable youth. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson talks about some of the biggest hot-button topics in regards to some of this potential legislation or regulations that will soon be implemented by the Alberta government.
The ones that have people most concerned, or the people are talking about the most at the moment, are a total ban on people under the age of 18 receiving top or bottom gender reassignment surgery. Now, bottom surgery is generally already not performed in Canada on under 18s, but top surgery is occasionally. So that there's a ban. There is also restrictions on when young people can begin hormone therapy. That'll be restricted for people 15 and under. They won't be allowed to do it. And then those age 16 and 17 will be able to, if they have parental and doctor and psychiatrist permission to do so. So a couple relatively significant restrictions on transgender healthcare for those under the age of 18. Now, the other thing that happened was some changes to school policy. The first is there's now an opt-in requirement for any time human sexuality, sexual orientation, or gender identity are discussed in schools. It used to be an opt-out system. So this obviously would affect something like sexual education classes. But of course, the question is open on what is this going to do to English literature classes? What is this going to do to biology classes? We still don't have a great answer on that. Also on the school theme, Alberta has followed in the footsteps of Saskatchewan and New Brunswick when it comes to name changes and pronoun changes. These rules are actually going to be even stricter in Alberta. Students under the age of 15, I believe, are going to require both parental consent and parental notification to change their name or their pronouns. Children aged 16 and 17, their parents will be notified of that, but the parents do not need to consent. So that actually goes further than the other provinces where parents wouldn't be notified for youth of that age. So that covers off the school thing. There are also going to be restrictions on transgender women participating in sports. We have very few details on what that's going to look like. There's obviously going to be consultations with sporting groups and leagues and things like that. So those are sort of the big changes that everyone's talking about. Of course, there are a few others. The Alberta government is going to try and attract some surgeons who specialize in gender affirmation surgery, and they're also going to pilot a counseling project for transgender youth. So it's a really, really large, I think there's about 10 items actually all in that the government has proposed in the last sort of 24 hours or so here.
The president of the Alberta Teachers Association, Jason Schilling, expressed his concerns with this potential legislation. He says what the government wants to move forward with will put many transgender youth at risk.
I think that this will have a very negative impact on the relationships between students and teachers and their families. And I think that the government, in its failure to consult with teachers and other groups before announcing these new policy directions, have really there's a lot of unintended consequences there that I don't think the government has thought about. This is one of our most vulnerable groups of students in the province. And what they've seen and what they witnessed yesterday was a government that curtailed their human rights, that basically said that, we're going to put all these fences around who you are. So I'm worried that, the students are now not going to feel comfortable or safe enough to be them true selves, to really experience life as who they are, and not be able to, feel that they're not able to come to teachers or other trusted adults in their lives who might work at schools and confide in them in their struggles. And that is, when we see the stats around suicide and homelessness, that is something that we need to be really careful about, especially with this group of kids.
Drew Barnes is a former independent MLA from Cypress Medicine Hat. He says many parents are now celebrating the news shared by Premier Daniel Smith. He says parents need to be informed when it comes to what's being shown or taught to their kids in school.
I'll give you one example here in Medicine Hat. School District 76 brought in a Alberta Health Services group. I think they were Safety Link, I believe they were called, and it was a trade show. And there was brochures and information about how to use drugs safely. And although I didn't see this part myself, apparently there was some information about different kinds of sexual practices. Hell, we have a law in Alberta that before any sexual discussions are with children, their parents get the opportunity to opt out. That's a perfect example of where the oversight wasn't put in, family rights were diminished.
Make sure you catch the full interview with former independent Alberta MLA Drew Barnes and myself coming up later in our broadcast. Federal Health Minister Mark Collins says he's disturbed by Premier Daniel Smith's proposed changes to rules on transgender youth in our schools. He says he plans to meet with Alberta Provincial Health Minister Adriana LaGrange to discuss plans to require parental consent for students 15 and under who want to change their names or pronouns at school. Holland says one of the main reasons kids commit suicide is due to questions around their sexual identity.
And I thought we were in a place in this country, when we voted on C3 and we stood unanimously. I thought we were in a place in this country where we were moving past this. I think it's extremely dangerous to engage in this kind of thing, which is, I think, playing politics when you're talking about children's lives. And so affirming gender, making sure that kids and families have the health care that they need on extremely sensitive issues is so very important.
There's going to be at least a 3-year delay to Ottawa's controversial plan to expand eligibility for assisted dying. The change was set to take effect next month that would have opened access to people with mental illness. Health Minister Holland says the delay is the result of input from the provinces and territories who say more time is needed to prepare for the change.
The problem is that you have the curriculum, you have the materials that people have to get trained by, and in order for the system to do that training and to get people ready to make sure that the right decisions are made. Again, what we're talking about here, and it's an important distinction, we're talking about people with intractable mental illness circumstances who have been suffering and tried absolutely everything, and that they get to the end of that journey and they on their own recognizance make a decision that they've tried everything and that they want to access MAID. What we want to make sure is that the system is trained to that standard, that the curriculums are adopted, and that the systems have fully metabolized what the intention is.
Federal Justice Minister Arif Irani added that medical professionals stressed the need to protect vulnerable people when it came to this legislation.
It is not ready right now. We heard that from doctors, we heard that from nurses, we heard that from psychiatric professionals. And if I could just add, the other important thing to calibrate here is that throughout this entire experience with implementing MAID in response to the Carter decision, we've always had a delicate balance in mind. That is, how do you empower autonomy and dignity on the part of an individual, and at the same time ensure that vulnerable people are protected.
Mike Schutten is the executive director of ARPA, or the Association for Reformed Political Action. He says the reason why the Trudeau government is delaying this legislation is so that they don't have to deal with it before the next federal election in October of 2025.
I think this is cover a little bit for the government at this time to just put this off until after the next election. 3 years from now will be after the next federal election. So they just don't have to deal with it for a while because they were recognizing that politically this was becoming something that was not attainable for them. They weren't going to win votes by doing this. They were probably going to lose votes. So let's just delay this further. That's what we think is happening, which is unfortunate because while this gets dealt with in the political realm, it is a deeply personal issue and it affects human life. We're talking about life and death here.
Make sure you catch the full interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher and the Executive Director of ARPA, Mike Schutten, coming up after Business News. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas says her party has moved a motion ordering the CBC to list all bonuses and amounts paid to executives last year, including what was paid to CBC President Catherine Tate. MP Thomas says it is wrong that the CBC, which has seen declining viewership over the years, is giving bonuses to executives with taxpayer money when so many Canadians are struggling. The Liberal NDP coalition shut down the motion in committee.
That no later than April 1st, 2024, the CBC provide the committee with the number of executive bonuses given and the monetary amount of each for the fiscal year 2023. I'm seeking consent from the committee to have this motion accepted.
The vote is on the motion that was moved by Ms. Thomas. Mr. Coteau?
No.
Ms. Dillon?
No.
Madame Guinea?
No.
Ms. Hefner?
No.
Mr. Noor Mohammed?
Nope.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Gladue?
Yes.
Ms. Berthold?
Oui.
Mr. Phillip?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Sorry, Mr. Phillip's great.
Mr. Lawrence. Monsieur Chaput?
No.
And Mr. Julian?
No.
So there is no consent for this motion to be discussed.
So when you add it all up, there were 7 who voted no to the motion compared to just 4 who voted yes. And by the way, CBC President Catherine Tate says she has not ruled out bonuses this year, even though the public broadcaster has laid off hundreds of employees. Well, we enjoyed another spectacular day across much of southwestern Alberta again. Lots of sunshine and warm temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though we may be seeing more clouds and moisture, however, rolling in this weekend.
Yeah, and why does it always have to happen right in time for the weekend? To you, Hal, I got to put a stop to that, don't I? Okay, so let's enjoy those clear skies tonight while we can. Overnight low of 0 as we get into tomorrow. Friday, we're seeing it's starting out sunny and then up to 10 degrees. That could be the end of those double digits, though, for a while, as well as the clear skies, because by Friday afternoon, we're seeing increasing cloud. By Friday night, we're seeing mainly cloudy skies, overnight low of 2 degrees. And then after that, that's when we're seeing that moisture, like you mentioned, over the weekend in the form of rain and snow. And we're also seeing some minus temperatures on the horizon as well. So I will be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Today marks the start of Black History Month here in Canada. Many groups are getting involved. And as BCN's Alex McLeod reports now, Lethbridge College is ready to celebrate.
We express ourselves through our hair, our clothing, how we walk, how we talk, and we are proud to be Black. Black is freedom. Black is power.
Lethbridge College kicked off the beginning of Black History Month Thursday morning. The month-long celebration honors the achievements and contributions of Black Canadians. The opening ceremony saw both students and staff fill the main entrance. Many came down in clothes that represent their culture. Brad Donaldson, president and CEO of the college, says he wants all students to feel included.
We've seen the growth over the last few months, a couple of years, in the number of cultures and races that are represented here in the college, and we constantly get the feedback that people feel welcomed, that the commitment to Black History Month in this case, but our commitment to students and employees, no matter where they come from, they feel it genuine. It's not something that we're forcing. It's something that we're growing and evolving and creating greater space. And the feedback we get consistently is that, yeah, I feel welcome here.
Lethbridge College has been celebrating Black History Month since 2017. This year, the college is offering events such as dance classes, a Kenyan meal kit pickup, and even Jeopardy! The month will wrap up with a second Cultural Clothing Day. Student Representative Teresa Ogason, who is originally from Nigeria, says she's excited about the support she has received.
This is a very special event, and I feel very privileged to be part of this. This is an opportunity to share the Black culture, and I like that we have the platform at the college. LCSA has been very supportive, the college as well. I am happy that we have a community as well that sort of put all of this together, and I feel very recognized, I feel very accepted, I feel very welcomed, and I'm not just saying this for myself, I'm saying this for everyone, every student out there that is in Canada that feels far away from home. Canada has made this a home to us, so thank you.
Black History Month has been celebrated across Canada since 2008. For Bridge City News, I'm Alex McLeod.
Lethbridge police have a man in custody following an investigation into child luring. Police allege that 35-year-old Oscar Cubades Palacio exploited a Winnipeg girl using Snapchat. The offenses date back to March of last year when the two met online. Police say Palacio coerced the victim into providing sexually explicit materials despite knowing she was a youth. The offenses were reported to Winnipeg police in July of last year, which kicked off an interprovincial investigation to identify the suspect and make an arrest. Palacio is scheduled to appear in court on February the 8th. The Alberta government announced new funding they say will help rural and urban communities save money and energy. Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz says the UCP will be investing millions of dollars to help communities hire staff and make upgrades to community centres and arenas, which will include replacing windows and upgrade lighting.
We know that energy efficient upgrades are expensive, and it can be hard for communities to cover the full upfront costs, especially now when the cost of living continues to rise. That's why I'm very excited to announce we're investing $18 million to help communities across the province become more energy efficient and, of course, reduce their costs. This new funding is delivered through the MCCAC and will be used to create new programs that will help communities access support for energy conservation, emissions reduction, and much more. Communities big and small, rural and urban, will all be able to access these programs.
Great news for our rural communities. Fabulous. Well, we enjoyed lots of sunshine and mild temperatures again today in Lethbridge, and the spring-like conditions will remain, but only for another day or so. Full weather details are coming up. It has been so nice having a clear sky during the evening this week. So many stars to enjoy. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it does appear, however, as though more clouds and moisture may be returning by the weekend.
Yeah, maybe just one more stargazing night this evening as we're looking at clear skies overnight, low of 0 degrees. Then looking at that last double-digit day there on a Friday, also increasing clouds throughout the day. By a Saturday, we are seeing a high of 4 degrees, so a drastic drop in temperature there, and we're seeing periods of rain. By Saturday evening, we're seeing snow mixed with rain, and then on Sunday we're seeing periods of snow and also into the minus temperatures. So keep in mind anything between 0 and minus 12, minus 13 is actually seasonal right now. So we're going to be back in the seasonal range for part of the week there. On Monday though, back up to 2 degrees and clear skies. And then we're seeing a 30% chance of flurries for both Tuesday and Wednesday, back in the minuses there with -1 for Tuesday, -3 for Wednesday. So like I was saying, the average high for this time of year is 0, -13, the average low, anything in that range is seasonal. 17 was our high temperature on this day back in 1992, and the record low for this day was -38. That was recorded back in 1996. Sun rose this morning at 8:04. We're looking at a sunset this evening just before 5:30, right at 5:27, giving us 9 hours and 23 minutes of daylight. 4 minutes more daylight than we saw yesterday. It's happening fast. Okay, so we're looking at a temperature steady at 10 degrees tomorrow in Victoria with a mix of sun and cloud, 20 wind as well. We are looking at 60% chance of early morning showers in Vancouver, also a high of 10 degrees there. Edmonton, looking at a mix of sun and cloud, 5 degrees for high. We're looking at fog, also fog patches in the morning there, dissipating before noon. 9 for a high in Calgary with mainly clear skies. As we get into the rest of the prairies, looking at Saskatoon, which is a high of 7 degrees, not bad at all, clear skies. Same thing for Regina. We're looking at that pair of 7s there in Saskatchewan tomorrow. 2 degrees for a high in Winnipeg. Winnipeg also seeing some fog patches in the morning, a mix of sun and cloud throughout the day there. 3 for a high in Toronto with Skies that are going to be getting more cloud coverage by the afternoon there. Same thing for Ottawa, 1 degree for a high there. And -2 is the expected high tomorrow in Montreal. Montreal also looking at a 30% chance of flurries. We're seeing more snow as well on the east coast here. Fredericton looking at 2 to 4 centimeters falling, 1 for a high also in Halifax. More snow though, looking at up to 5 centimeters of snow happening there. 0 for a high in Charlottetown, 2 to 4 centimeters, and a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow in St. John's with a high of -1. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Crown Corporation that manages a number of public funds and pensions in Alberta set up a new one. It's a $1 billion fund focusing on the global energy transition and decarbonization sectors. The Alberta Investment Management Corporation says the new fund will offer exposure to opportunities such as industrial decarbonization and carbon capture. AIMCO has more than $158 billion in assets under management. Shell says lower oil and gas prices led to its profits falling by nearly a third last year. Prices dropped after surging in 2022 in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Shell says its post-tax earnings fell 29% to $28.3 billion. That compares with the previous year's all-time high of $40 billion. Company officials at Shell say that they're not taking much of a hit from attacks on ships in the Red Sea, which have prompted companies to divert shipments. The Canada Energy Regulator has issued its reasons for approving Trans Mountain Corporation's revised pipeline variance application. The regulator says it found that approving the application with 4 conditions was in the public interest. It was based on new inspection commitments and a demonstration of quality management processes from Trans Mountain. The Crown Corporation ran into recent problems while drilling through hard rock in British Columbia and asked to use a different size of pipe for the location in question. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 97 points on the day to finish at 21,119. The Dow was up 369 points to 38,519. The S&P 500 was up 60 on the day to 4906, and the Nasdaq was up 197 points to 15,361. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.89 to $73.95 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 5 cents to $2.05 US. Gold was up $15.47 on the day to finish at $2,054.99 US an ounce, and silver was up 22 cents to $23.18 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.70 per bushel, barley's at $6.27, canola's at $13.67, and corn is at $7.54 per bushel. Live cattle were up $2.40 to $179.75. Feeder cattle March contract was up $4.73 to $244.88. And lean hogs were down 55 cents to 75.80. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.73 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government is introducing new legislation when it comes to child and youth-centered policies. Officials say all gender reassignment surgeries for minors under the age of 17 will be prohibited. The use of puberty blockers and hormone therapies will not be allowed for those under the age of 15, except for those who've already undergone treatment. And mature teenagers aged 16 and 17 will only move forward with puberty blockers and hormone therapies for gender reassignment with parental, physician, and psychologist approval. As for pronouns in schools, Premier Daniel Smith says parents must be notified if a child wants to change their pronoun or gender identity at their school. Coming up, we're going to chat with former Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes to get his thoughts on how this new legislation will impact both transgender youth and parents. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of our local stories, visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith unveiled plans for new legislation aimed at safeguarding parental rights here in the province, particularly pertaining to kids who identify with the transgender community. Now, to chat about this in more detail is former independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes, who joins us now from the Gas City Medicine Hat. And Mr. Barnes will maybe talk a little bit about some of the additional measures that the Alberta government could enact to impact both parents and kids. Drew, welcome back to BCN. Okay, Drew, let's hear your thoughts on the recent announcement from Premier Daniel Smith and why you believe these changes are being made in regards to parental rights in schools.
Well, yeah, I mean, Essentially, they're good. It recognizes that parents need to be involved in their children's education. It involves that some decisions are best made when we reach our maturity. It gives the opportunity for schools and parents and students and children to work more collectively. There's a whole bunch of good things, but Hal, it doesn't go far enough. Um, the progressives, the left, has already reacted, overwhelmingly negative, claiming lawsuits, and they're going to fight forward. And I mean, and of course, we haven't heard if Premier Smith is actually going to put this legislation into legislation, or if it's just a policy. So who knows? So let's look at some long-term solutions, and how that's why I'm such a believer in more choice for parents and students.
So what do you believe is potentially missing from the list of essential items you believe should be included in this potential new legislation for parental rights?
Well, some things that are missing are more choice for parents and more opportunity for parents to be involved. Let's start with where the education system's at in Alberta, and unfortunately, we're in a free fall. The results are showing more and more that students aren't getting the same quality education that they got 10 or 20 years ago, and comparative to the rest of the world, we're not keeping up. So then you look at the agenda of culture and those kind of things on the left, and how that is taken the focus away from what needs to be. So Hal, I know that if we put more choice in education for parents, choice is the only way to hold our system competitive and make it better over the long term. It will allow parents to put in the enactment of families first, and will allow a stronger system for all Albertans.
So Drew, can you explain what you mean when you say that parents have first responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, first responsibility for raising their child in the most positive, effective manner. We need parents to be involved every step of the way to ensure that their children are receiving top quality education, to ensure that their children are in a safe environment. Our culture, our country is built on the foundation of families first. So where this starts, Hal, is with parents being the first ones involved in their child's education, to make sure that it is effective and the best education possible, and to make sure it's what they and their children need and want.
So Drew, what can you tell us about the per student capita fully funded pod system? Your thoughts on it?
Oh, Hal, it's something that's absolutely necessary to put in the choice and competition that our school system so desperately lacks right now, and needs to compete again in the world. Basically, every student in Alberta costs the government, costs us, the taxpayer, about $25,000 per year. So I envision a system where, let's say, an accredited teacher had 20 students that wanted to be under that accredited teacher's instructions. 20 times 25,000, an accredited teacher should be able to take that pot of money and start and create a school. And how good would this be for a school that's able to focus on things like wealth creation, trades, the basics as well? And how good would this be for the opportunity for parents to be involved in their child's education? And again, our whole system is under stress, and only choice and competition will make it better.
So what kind of skills do you envision really being taught for something like this here? Like you said, trade skills, wealth creation, property rights, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you for that. Like, let's start with wealth creation. So many people don't realize that wealth is created from property rights and the respect for the rule of law. Hell, when you look at our Canadian culture now, property rights have been stepped on terribly the last 10 or 20 years. I mean, look at the situation with lawlessness and crime escalating. The rule of law and even access to courts for civil matters is very, very hard now. So I believe that if we could focus our students and our youth on the fact that we need property rights and respect for the rule of law to create wealth. And again, Hal, when you see that Canada slipped to like 30th in OECD countries, and our GDP per person and our standard of living is falling dramatically compared to America's and others, we have to do this. And it's best for our children, it's best for our families.
Drew, do you believe there should be more support for homeschooling and maybe private schooling, including Christian schools?
Absolutely. Christian schools are one of the great things in our culture right now, and they save the province of Alberta, the taxpayer, a lot of money. And so let's enhance that so we can have more options and choice. Likewise, homeschoolers. I just love homeschoolers. You know, many times they've said to me they don't actually want more money. They just want more freedom to teach their children in the way they want. Well, I believe that, you know, a little more support, a little less control from a school board that maybe doesn't provide any extra value would go a long way to make the education for our children better, and how we have to give our kids more opportunity and hope.
So Drew, how do you propose to really balance the rights of parents with the rights of students, which seems to be quite controversial right now?
Yeah, we absolutely it is. Again, you know, the majority age rule of 16 and 18 are there for a reason. And I envision a situation where when parents are more involved, when parents feel more comfortable and know that it's more open for them to be involved in their children's school system. And there are consequences if there's choice for these parents, you know, if they want to take their kids to a different school, if they feel that's necessary with more choice. I believe that that will make society better and stronger. It'll give our kids more opportunity, and how it'll make families stronger. It'll give families the opportunity to communicate and work together.
Now, Drew, how do you really address the concerns of the LGBTQ2+ community?
Well, you know, I'm grateful that they're stepping up and they're saying what their concerns are, and we're in a situation now where they're having the opportunity to speak, and let's communicate about it. But Hal, I would say this: let's end the divisiveness. I mean, I've seen from the progressives, you know, all this fear mongering and scare tactics, and they go to the worst case example every time. Let's create an environment of respect and opportunity for all Alberta children.
So how do you think the proposed changes that Premier Daniel Smith is discussing will really impact a student's mental health? Now, the ATA, Drew, says transgender youth are 5 times more likely to think about suicide and 8 times more likely to attempt it than other children.
Yeah, that's a sad statistic, and that we have to work at. But I would say at this point, this divisiveness, this path we've gone down has partly led to those statistics. So let's get parents more involved. Let's open up the school system so parents can be more involved, and kids will have their opportunity to work with their parents, work with their schools and their teachers as a necessary part of their education. And you know, with a little less rhetoric and a little more love, how this will be better for everyone.
So Drew, what measures do you think should really be put in place to ensure students' personal rights are not violated?
Well, again, I think the measures now where the Premier Smith is talking about, and it was really started by New Brunswick and Premier Moe in Saskatchewan, the opportunity for kids to know that their families are there, their parents are there, and their teachers are there. There's great support everywhere. We'll protect their rights. And of course, I think that our situation of codifying it to make it clear will be good for everybody, because you know how it is in life, Hal. A lot of times we just want that certainty of knowing the rules, and to have you know, Premier Moe and now Premier Smith come out with some certainty is a good thing for everybody. We will know what the rules are, and we'll be able to work together.
Now, can you provide some examples of how parental rights in education have been compromised in the past?
Well, I mean, I'll give you one example here in Medicine Hat. School District 76 brought in a Alberta Health Services group. I think they were Safety Link, I believe they were called, and it was a trade show, and there was brochures and information about how to use drugs safely. And although I didn't see this part myself, apparently there was some information about different kinds of sexual practices. Hal, we have a law in Alberta that before any sexual discussions or with children, their parents get the opportunity to opt out. That's a perfect example of where the oversight wasn't put in, family rights were diminished. To what extent would probably vary per family. You know, those kind of things. How Alberta will be better and stronger when parents are more involved, when families are stronger, and we have more choice in how our kids are educated.
Yeah, let's flesh that out a little bit more, Drew. How do you really think the proposed changes being discussed right now in our province will affect the overall quality of education?
Well, I think it'll be good. Again, some certainty is very, very good. It'll allow our teachers and our administrators to focus on the basics of education and these extra things that seem to be lacking. It will give it will give them the opportunity to focus on giving our children every opportunity. Um, and again, there's some other opportunities in there where parents want to be involved, groups want to be involved in education, but it has been so divisive, it has been so propagandized in the last little while. I'm going to suggest that the people have been scared to step up. Let's come up with some rules that are being talked about, parents more involved, children protected, and let's make Alberta strong.
Do you think there are other steps should be taken to really protect parental rights here in Canada?
Again, I think, Hal, without more choice in education, a lot of this is just a short-term fix. Our system has become this divisive system of looking for division and talking about things that aren't there to protect all kids. And again, we've heard so much about how all of our children aren't being properly served. From those with gender issues to those with achievement issues. So this will allow our school system to focus on that, but with choice. Again, as long as there's only one school system, as long as there's only one place for kids to go and parents to be involved with their kids, we're not going to have the long-term change we need. Hal, I know that if we put in choice where I can shop around for the best spot for my child's needs, we will all be stronger. So the Alberta government long-term needs to enhance choice, and that is supporting it financially, and that is supporting it legislatively as well.
How can we really ensure transparency, though, Drew, in the implementation of some of these proposed changes?
Well, that's a good question. I think we need parents to get more involved in their school boards, whether that's attending meetings, voicing to the trustees what their expectations are, or running. I mean, quite often, there's opportunities to run on a school board. Being involved on your parent council is another big one. Be involved in your school, and if there are some concerns, in a respectful, proper way, go to your principal, go to your teacher, go to your MLA. Let's work together to make the system better.
So what do you say to those parents and teachers, other educators, who really feel that some of these changes may lead to a decrease in inclusivity in schools?
Yeah, I'm certainly they're entitled to speak up, and I'm glad to hear their ideas. But I suggest the opposite. This is going to give an opportunity for parents to be more involved, for the rules to be clearer, and for the opportunity for children to be involved with their parents, with their teachers, with their administrators, and and everyone working together on a bright future for all.
So Drew, can you elaborate a little bit more on your views on the role of parents in a child's education, particularly in relation to the proposed changes here?
Yes, thank you. Parents have first and foremost responsibility. As a parent, it's our responsibility to ensure that our children are receiving quality education, receiving the best quality education, and in a safe, happy environment. And how when parents aren't involved, we all suffer. So let's continue to work so parents feel like they're wanted, and parents know that they have the opportunity to have say.
Drew Barnes is the former independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat. Drew, thanks so much for joining us today from the Gas City in the Hat.
Hal, thanks again. Have a good day.
Well, Canada has rapidly been expanding access to medical aid in dying, otherwise known as MAID. Some see this as a necessary thing, while others see this as dangerous. Joining us to discuss this in more detail is Mike Schutten. He is the Executive Director of the Association for Reformed Political Action and also has a deeply personal connection to the topic regarding his family. Mike, welcome to Bridge City News. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Firstly, you're going to be one of the speakers at the Canadian Religious Freedom Summit taking place at Metropolitan Bible Church in Ottawa this Saturday, February 3rd. And I believe the focus of this conference is on MAID, right? So can you maybe explain a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. It's a conference that the organizers felt they wanted to just use the opportunity to help the church understand as Christians, how do we respond to the expansions to euthanasia in our country? How do we respond to people who are suffering, who do want to die? And how do we do this in the face of, yeah, like I said, more and more access to euthanasia and the legalization of it?
And I understand that people can actually watch online, but they need to get registered first, right?
That's correct. I think it's freedomsummit.ca. They can go to and get all the information there. It's fairly straightforward. I've been assured by the host that there's approximately 500 people who are attending in person, and then about another 1,000 who have already registered online. So, of course, online they can take any number. So, if you would like to take in the conference, you're welcome to do that.
All right. Okay. So the focus of this conference is on MAID, or medical assistance in dying. Now, March 17th was the date set for Canada to expand medical assistance in dying to those whose sole underlying condition is mental illness. But perhaps somewhat surprisingly, the federal government has decided to follow the parliamentary committee's advice to put a pause on this for now. So can you maybe give us a little update of this?
Sure, yeah. And just quickly for your viewers going back, this was a sunset clause that had been included in the original legislation back in 2021. Between 2021 and 2023, when that sunset clause was set to expire and people with mental illness could request euthanasia and receive it, there was incredible pushback, not just from Canadians and religious Canadians, but from psychiatrist associations, from people who have been struggling with mental illness, saying to the government, saying, what are we doing here? Like, are we really giving enough attention to how this is going to end up in disaster for many people who are dealing with mental health struggles? So the government in 2022 introduced a bill that delayed that sunset clause by 1 year. So you're right, it was set to expire March 17th, 2024. And just this week, the government indicated that Canada's still not ready for this. And they're this morning indicated that they're going to introduce a bill to delay it another 3 years. So the government seems still intent on making this legal. That's unfortunate. We think it should never become legal for people with mental illness. But the reality is we have 3 more years to continue advocating for those people and those vulnerable Canadians. So hopefully, God willing, the day will come when they're not susceptible to MAID.
So what exactly do politicians mean when they say Canada isn't ready yet for MAID based on mental illness alone? What would need to happen for the nation to be ready for this?
Yeah, it's hard to really ascertain that. I mean, there's many in the medical community who will indicate we're ready. Just make it happen and we'll deal with it, kind of thing. I think this is cover a little bit for the government at this time to just put this off until after the next election. 3 years from now will be after the next federal election, so they just don't have to deal with it for a while because they were recognizing that politically this was becoming something that was not attainable for them. They weren't going to win votes by doing this. They were probably going to lose votes. So let's just delay this further. That's what we think is happening, which is unfortunate because, yeah, while this gets dealt with in the political realm, it is a deeply personal issue and it affects human life. We're talking about life and death here. Really, we are. And it's unfortunate that at times it does get politicized, but at the same time, like I said, we're thankful that it's not going to become legal right now this March, and we have time to continue advocating for those vulnerable Canadians.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you yourself are someone who has a very personal experience with this subject. Your son, Marcus, passed away after a battle with cancer. Can you maybe share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it was a very hard road that we walked down. I had been in my capacity with Arbor Canada working on this issue for quite a long time, and it becomes kind of cerebral, like just it's a policy issue and you're working at it from that angle. And then at the beginning of 2021, February 2021, our 17-year-old son was diagnosed with bone cancer. It had metastasized already at diagnosis, so that the prognosis didn't look good. He underwent about 20 rounds of chemotherapy over the course of the next year. And then about 2 months before he passed away, we had to make the decision with him to end treatment for cure and just focus on treatment of the symptoms and live life as best we could for those last 2 months. And Marcus passed away on May 29th, 2022.
I'm
So
so sorry.
yeah, it's definitely harder now that he's gone. It was a hard road to walk, but just knowing that he's never going to come back and sit at our table anymore it's really hard, and sometimes you just actually don't know how to deal with it. My wife and I obviously are believers, and that's where we put our hope and trust. And we also feel like this conference we're talking about in Ottawa at the Metropolitan Bible Church is an opportunity to share with people there, and as many people who want to hear the story, is that good can come from suffering.
And Marcus, I
think
believe,
as
was 17, you said, right?
Yes, yeah, he was only 17.
Unreal. Did doctors suggest a maid at all?
Thankfully not. So Marcus was 18 when he did pass away, and he legally he could have requested maid, but when he was diagnosed, he was still a child, 17. So all of his treatment occurred at in British Columbia here at the BC Children's Hospital, and then all of his palliative and hospice care was taken care of and administered by Canuck Place Children's Hospice. So in those facilities, MAID is not a solution to suffering. So we're very thankful that that wasn't something we had to deal with at that time.
Did you feel that the palliative care was done well?
Oh, it was superb. I think we experienced in the child track what we can do as human beings insofar as treating people who are suffering from terminal illness. And Marcus he died essentially from drowning, his lungs filled with tumors. And yet he was still able to live every day that God gave him and experience some joy, some pleasure in every day. And as a family, because his care was provided through Canuck Place Hospice, we were able to just spend those moments with him, and we'll cherish that forever.
Yeah. Do you think that he's someone that would have chosen MAID had he had that opportunity presented to him?
I would pray that he wouldn't have, and I think that because of the way he was treated and the perspective that the medical community had towards him, he wouldn't have. I think that perspective is something that we've sometimes lost in our country, where when someone's suffering, then they see themselves as a burden, and we affirm that they are a burden. Then that person is going to despair, and when despair sets in, then the desire to die is only one step away from that. But if the person who's suffering, as Marcus's oncologist actually said to him when he told him that there was no more treatment available, Marcus asked him, he said, "Doc, how long do I have?" And the doctor said to him, he said, "Marcus, we don't know how long you have, but what we promise you is that every day that you do live, we're going to ensure you live it to the best you can." And that perspective didn't lead Marcus to despair. He was able to enjoy those last 2 months.
Amazing. And after your son's death, you testified at the Federal Assisted Dying Committee, and I'm sure that was difficult to do. So how did MPs respond to your views and your testimony?
They were, I think, appreciative of that perspective. There were some definitely who you could feel like a real worldview clash in the room when we were presenting to them and the questions that came. Some of them obviously were pro-euthanasia and pro-euthanasia even for minors. And that was hard to deal with. We really had to stay focused on the subject matter and just trying to encourage them to really consider whether or not you as a country want to expand to the realm of minors, because that's not legal in Canada right now, but it's something that's quote unquote on the table for discussion. And the committee at that time was discussing the topic of minors and euthanasia or medical assistance in dying and wanted to hear our perspective. So we're very grateful for that opportunity to just share our testimony and our lived experience with how even when your child is suffering from a terminal illness, there can be even joy found in that suffering. And it really is that perspective we have towards it that is going to either encourage someone to request to die or encourage someone to just live life to the fullest as long as they have it.
Right. I'm surprised they came at you like that. Like you'd think there'd be a little bit more sensitivity there.
Like I said, it was a worldview clash, and they peppered us for about 45 minutes with questions after we shared our testimony, just trying to get out of us that, for some people this is good. It might not be good for you, but for some people they might want this.
Right.
And we really, like I said, really try to stay focused on the points we wanted to make.
Exactly. And you had your own story to tell, and yeah, like what really could they expect of you? So what kinds of specific supports and treatment options would you like to see put in place that could potentially help those considering MAID to choose to continue living instead?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two parts I would say to that. One is the responsibility of the church. I think we have a huge responsibility to seek out people in our spheres of influence, whether they be coworkers, neighbors, elderly people in our communities who are lonely and who are suffering, to come alongside them and ensure them that their life has value and we care for them. The other component is strictly within the medical system, and I think that Canada needs to put far more emphasis on palliative care than we currently do. There is incredible supports available for people who are suffering from terminal illnesses that ensure that their life is comfortable in spite of all the ailments they might have, that their life is comfortable and that their loved ones can be with them, just spending that time together, making those memories without having the distraction of constantly running around town trying to find the latest medication to assist and help. So we experience that from the Canuck Place Children's Hospice, and so we know that we can do it. Now, it's a matter of, will our country and our government officials and healthcare professionals, will they put priority on that? And if they put priority on that, then I think that there's a lot more that can be done for suffering individuals.
Right. What kind of feedback have you been hearing from physicians? Are they supportive or against MAID based solely on mental illness? I know with your case it was a bit different, but we're talking about mental illness here.
Yeah, that's a good question. On the mental illness side, you don't find many physicians who are in favor of MAID for mental illness. They recognize that mental illness is very complex, and there can be seasons of life where somebody is feeling very down and feels like their life is not worth anything. And then that changes and they begin to flourish again as a productive member of society. So one of the key terms you'll hear in the debate about medical assistance in dying is irremediability. And that means that whatever disease or condition you have is not fixable, like it's not going to get better. You cannot ascertain that for mental illness because there's so many fluctuations. And for that reason, I think doctors are very cautious to speak favorably about MAID for mental illness.
Yeah, that's kind of a slippery slope, isn't it? Yeah, no, interesting. How far do you think that this could go?
When Canada legalized euthanasia, then ARPA Canada, at that time, we said, we now that we've crossed the line whereby it's legal for some human beings to take the lives of other human beings, it's going to be very hard to say where that line should be, and that's exactly what we're seeing play out. It originally was for people who their death was reasonably foreseeable. It was imminent. They were going to die within a few days, so they could speed that process up by requesting MAID. And now it's for people with disabilities. We're talking about mental illness. We're talking about minors. So we've come to a place where if some people can get it, why can't other people? So it's very challenging where to draw that line.
And then on the other side, what are the proponents of MAID saying? Why do they believe that it's such a positive thing for individuals to qualify for MAID based solely on mental illness alone?
Yeah, so the proponents actually they say exactly what they want. And I think they want it to be available to anybody who wants it. If you're suffering from anything, whether it be a bad marriage or a disability or a mental illness, anybody who's suffering, this should be one of the tools in the suite of tools that a physician has that they can use to treat, quote unquote, treat your suffering. And the senators, especially in Canada's Senate, are very open about that's where they want to see this end up, where there really is no rules. Anybody who asks for it can receive it.
Kind of more like a human rights thing, like if it's your right to, it's your body, your choice type of an argument. Okay. Any final thoughts on what people can do to prevent the expansion of MAID if that's what they believe?
Yeah, I think there's a political response to this. So be in touch with your members of parliament, your MLAs, and encourage them to not expand this any further. You can go to arpacanada.ca to find ways in which to do that. The other response is what I call a pastoral response. And that is when there are people in your life, and we all have them, people who are suffering, do what you can to affirm their dignity, affirm their value, and share with them that they are worthy, so that any despair that they might have, that doesn't lead them to that next step of thinking their life is not worth living anymore. So those two responses, I think, can go a long way to ensuring that the number of people who are requesting euthanasia gets lower and lower and lower.
Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Mike, and for sharing your story. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike Schutten is the Executive Director of ARPA and will be speaking at the Canadian Religious Freedom Summit taking place at Metropolitan Bible Church in Ottawa this Saturday. You can join the summit online by registering at freedomsummit.ca. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.